Hello, this is Martin Gore from Depeche Mode.
Hi, this is Dave Gahan from Depeche Mode, and you are listening to
My Nerd World.
Dave has always had that same way of saying, this is Dave Gahan from Depeche Mode. Like, even going back to the 80s, he's always... Actually, Martin has said it the same way as well, now that I think about it. One of my favorite little moments from 101 is when, you know, and you have different favorite moments from 101. At least I do. So non-music related, right? Not the concert footage, but one of my favorite little moments is when Martin is sitting on the bed in the hotel room and he's doing an interview with a radio station, and you know, we don't generally like DJs, but we're trying, I guess I shouldn't say that, we're trying to do promotion. Always makes me laugh just having spent the first part of my radio career doing music radio. I appreciate the honesty. Welcome to Depeche Mode, the podcast here on My Nerd World. I am your host, Jon Justice, once again, here to talk about the greatest band in the world. Tour continues in Mexico, and from what I can see, just based off of the few clips online, it seems to be just a fantastic series of shows. I was just watching a clip a moment ago, and the crowd seems to be incredibly enthralled with not only the band while they're performing, but in between the songs. It looks like they had a fantastic crowd in Mexico City again, and I'm hopeful that if they did use Mexico City as the filming location for the live tour release, physical release, it seemed like it would have been a good choice. So, as I mentioned on last week's episode, there were filming cameras there. There was the Mexican director that was filming the documentary, so it remains to be seen whether or not this turns into that physical release that I've been talking about over the past few weeks. One thing that I failed to mention on last week's show, which was really, really dumb of me, because it was the main reason why I had speculated again that this would be the location in Mexico for the physical release, and that is, as people walked, I had a photo of it. I used it for the thumbnail on the YouTube posting for the show, but there was a disclaimer for people walking into the venue that they were going to be filming a documentary, and that if you were coming into the venue, you agreed to be part of the documentary. So, and I completely failed to mention it on last week's episode, which was probably the biggest piece of evidence that would be the location where they would be shooting for the live physical release. So we'll see how that turns out. Not a whole lot going on. Obviously, the band's on the road. We are expecting to get the remixes and a single release for My Favorite Stranger tomorrow. I was wrestling with waiting until tomorrow to do the show, but since I've been fairly consistent getting it out on Thursdays, I figured, you know what, I'll wait and talk about the remixes, assuming we get them tomorrow on next week's episode, and then I'll have some time to sit with them. I recently went back and gave the Ghosts Again and Wagging Tongue remixes another listen, and I'm glad that I went and revisited them, because I found that on a third or fourth listen, there were a few of those remixes that struck me differently, and I found much more enjoyable than the first time listening. I'm not expecting any B-sides coming out with the single release for My Favorite Stranger. Again, I believe those are going to be reserved for something in the next several months before the end of the year, a larger release. At the same time, you know, we are heading into October, so we're down to the last few months of the year. So we'll see if we get an official announcement within the next month or so as the band continues to tour and then heads here to back to America. There is one news item I wanted to share before we get into a lot of great listener feedback this week. So what I typically do going into the show, if I don't have anything personally that I want to discuss at length about the band. And I'm saving some ideas for the show for down the road when we get out of this phase that we're in right now and the tour wraps up and we don't have any more material to talk about. I have some ideas of shows that I want to do in the future involving some other individuals as well. So at the moment, the length of the shows will probably be a bit shorter just because of that. But what I typically do is I hop online and I do a weekly search for just the term Depeche Mode. I look for news items and then I do an all search to see if anything has popped up since the previous week's show. This one item was one of the first things that popped up, and it made me chuckle. There's an article out of The Guardian, and it was a recent interview with the band Europe. Now, this is not a band that I was ever a fan of. Everybody knows their hit single, The Final Countdown. I was never a fan of that song particularly. It's not one that I'm going to crank up or, if I'm listening to it and it pops on the radio or whatever. I didn't hate it, but it was just there. There was an interview, though, with the guitarist, Jon Norum. And I wanted to read to you a bit of this portion with the guitarist because he ends up mentioning Depeche Mode, and it made me chuckle. So it goes like this. In a recent interview with The Guardian, Europe's Jon Norum admits he changed his mind once he got his head around The Final Countdown. A rock jukebox would not be complete without the song. It would become a staple of karaoke and weddings and of sports montages, and it transformed the careers of the Swedish rockers Europe. But not everyone was a fan of The Final Countdown, with guitarist Jon Norum admitting that he thought it was dreadful when he first heard it. He did get his head around it, though, but he all but had to hold his nose when frontman Joey Tempest presented with a demo of the synth-led track. Norum, a top-tier guitar player by anyone's lights, initially didn't know where his electric guitar would fit with Tempesta's synth riff and how they would make sense of it all. When Joey first played me the demo for The Final Countdown, I thought it was dreadful. I was into heavy rock, and hearing that synthesizer melody over and over drove me nuts. I didn't want to have anything to do with the song. To me, it was like, are we turning into Depeche Mode? Oh, that gave me a chuckle. Norum's hesitancy was understandable, but the times were changing. By 1985, synthesizers had made their presence felt in rock music, and notably on Van Halen's 1984, with Jump lighting the way for what was a fast-maturing technology. Norum kept an open mind, and once the traditional instrumentation of the modern beat combo was applied to the arrangement, it all came together. Now, when I saw the article and the quote, again, it gave me a chuckle, are we turning into Depeche Mode? Immediately, I was thinking of 1988. I don't know why that particular year came into mind, but it did. And I was like, I wonder if this is around 98. I was surprised when it mentioned it was 85, that being a reference to Depeche Mode. And that might be the reason why my head originally landed on 1988, because that's, of course, when, especially here in the United States, Depeche Mode exploded in terms of popularity. They had already been well-known in Europe, and these Swedish rockers, I'm sure, were probably more familiar with the band than a lot of people were in America at the time. But again, I thought it was interesting that he was referencing, are we Depeche Mode? And if that indeed was a quote back from 85, then he really was referencing the band at a much earlier portion in their career. Now, granted, 88's only a few years later on, but that time period before we got into the 4-year window of releases post Ultra time moved a lot slower back then in terms of those years, especially when you're younger. So, I immediately go back to Shake the Disease and Catching Up With, and of course Black Celebration prior to that. So I can't help but wonder if when he mentions and makes that comment, and I'm thinking way too much about this, but it's Depeche Mode and I don't care, if he was kind of referring to their poppier side, earlier in their career and perhaps bigger hits, like Just Can't Get Enough. Speaking of which, I think it was a comment on last week's podcast, if I'm not mistaken. It might have been something I saw posted on X, but I totally agreed with the comment. Somebody had said, and if I did this on last week's show, I apologize for repeating myself. I think I saw it on X, though. Somebody had made a comment with regard to Just Can't Get Enough and how, the song is what it is in terms of the band's early career, but live it really is a banger of a song. And yeah, you know what? I tend to, maybe it was Matt. Was that you? Maybe Matt, you mentioned that. Maybe that's what it was. I think Matt maybe have mentioned it in his ranking of the albums. We have quite a few rankings that we'll dive into here with listener feedback. But it's always cool to see our band referenced by other individuals. It still feels like even all these years later that they still haven't totally received the credit that they deserve, and I think that adds to the uniqueness and the bond that we have with the band. That being said, they did end up in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, so I suppose I should at least acknowledge that, right? All right, let's get into your listener feedback this week. And thank you to everybody who wrote in, the Jon Justice, JON@gmail.com, or you can leave a comment up on YouTube. First off, and you are all friends of the show, just in case I mistakenly exclude somebody. But Danielle Manette writes, I might be one of the few who sat through your album ranking from last week, and it inspired me to do the same. Yeah, actually, I was very pleased to hear from many people that made it all the way through my ramblings of last week's episode. I've given a score to each song of each album on a scale of 10 according to my level of enjoyment and sentimental value. 0, of course, it's 100% subjective, and calculated the average score. So here's my ranking. The results are not all that surprising to me. It confirms what I already knew in my heart, but now I have hard data to prove it, mainly that my masterpiece trifecta is Black Celebration, Music for the Masses, and Violator, and that Memento Mori is indeed a very strong album. I've attached a file with my song scoring, if you're curious to know about it. That's it for now. Now let me get back to doing some actual work. Have a good one, Danielle Manette. So her ranking goes as follows, and I'll just go through the list here. I won't go into the exact... Well, I will. Delta Machine got a 5.3. Spirit, 5.6. Speak and Spell, 5.7. Sounds of the Universe, a 5.9. Exciter, 6.1. Ultra, 6.5. A Broken Frame, 6.9. Playing the Angel, 7.1. Construction Time Again, 8.1. Songs of Faith and Devotion, 8.3. Some Great Reward, 8.8. Memento Mori, 8.8. Violator, 9. Black Celebration, 9.2. And Music for the Masses, 9.4. By the way, I am hanging on to these rankings because, and while I'm not able to cover everybody, I have one here that I'll mention in just a moment. Jan or Jan, I think I've been through this before, so my apologies if I'm saying it wrong, sent me one hell of a comprehensive list. I feel like I need to compile all the data and come up with some mega listing to, the end-all, be-all of Depeche Mode rankings. Like, I know that if I grab all this information and I send it off to friend of the show, Matt, like, I almost feel like he would, if I just emailed Matt, I get the feeling that he there's no way he could not go and crunch all the data to come up with a master list. So, you know what, Matt, I'm not going to send it to you because I feel like that you would not be able to not crunch the data. I am going to hang on to it, though, because I feel like there's something that I can do with this information at some point in time. And so many of you have taken the time to do your own list and rankings that I just feel like your hard work should pay off. So Jan writes, unless it's Jon, if it is, I apologize again. They write, "Hi John, it seems you don't want us to be bored. Just like you, I did some analysis when choosing my favorite albums. I'm a playlist guy, as you may have noticed, so this is a quite easy task. I just put my 57 favorite songs into Excel and started filtering. Looking at the album tracks alone, 4 albums achieved the best result. A Broken Frame, Music for the Masses, Violator, Memento Mori, each with 4 songs in my playlist. However, when tracks from remixes, compilations, and B-sides are included, Music for the Masses comes out on top with 10 tracks, followed by Construction Time Again, and Violator with 6 tracks each. Some may consider it sacrilege to know my least favorite albums are Speak and Spell, Black Celebration, Songs of Faith and Devotion, and Ultra. Each one has only 1 album track on my playlist. To finish this fun counting, the clear winner of my top 10 song playlist is Violator with 4 tracks." Now, again, they had sent over a hell of a comprehensive list, and I'm going to hang on to it. It got me thinking, too, of, and it was mentioned in this email, and thank you so much, as always, either Jan or Jon. I think it's Jon. I think we've been through that, and my apologies if I forgot. But the subjectivity that goes into these rankings and our love of various Depeche Mode for different reasons. I would be interested to know if there is a correlation between what our other favorite bands are and the Depeche Mode songs and albums that we enjoy. Like, is there anything to an individual's taste in music overall and their love of Depeche Mode in particular songs? Like, I remember going back to the 90s, and there was this moment when it seemed like, and I think it was I know it was Axl Rose, but I think this is what is making me remember this period. But there was a moment in time when metal was having its heyday, and Guns N' Roses was really popular, and Axl Rose had come out and said that he was a 9 Inch Nails fan. And then there were other artists at the time that you would never associate as being Depeche Mode fans that were Depeche Mode fans. And that seems to be something that's fairly consistent, that people from all different musical backgrounds have loved this band. And so I'd be really interested to see what other people's favorite bands are and if that relates at all to the type of Depeche Mode music that they are drawn to more. So with this last one, like for example, Speak and Spell always seems to get the bottom of always seems to land on the bottom of the list simply because it's more of, and this is written in one of the album feedbacks that I have this week, but it seems to be more of Vince's album. But to hear them say like Black Celebration, Songs of Faith and Devotion, and Ultra, which are 3 albums that I would put in, within the top 5 favorite of all the bands. So I would be curious to know if they have a more eclectic taste in music that makes them gravitate away or move away from those albums and gravitate towards other albums. It's hard for me to go and pin down like what my other favorite bands are. Typically, I look at it from a standpoint of which bands have I gone to see live and seen the most. Oddly, the band that, and I wouldn't necessarily immediately think to say this is one of my favorite bands, but they are. The band that I've seen the most next to Depeche Mode at some 20-odd shows is Toad the Wet Sprocket. But this is also a band that I haven't really followed that much over the course of the past few years since they continued to put out albums. I kind of was like a lot of people when it comes to Depeche Mode. After, say, Songs of Faith and Devotion, they just didn't follow the band anymore. I like Duran Duran, but I didn't follow any of their recent stuff. I loved Jesus Jones, EMF, Pop Will Lead Itself, but I also like Maroon 5 and a lot of, modern alternative rock too. So, again, just wondering if there's a correlation there. There may not be, It could just be individuals' taste, but I'm just wondering if their tastes and your tastes in other bands influences your taste in Depeche Mode. All right, next up we got Jason. Jason writes, after 6 months since the album release, I'm still struggling with My Favorite Stranger and Wagging Tongue, so I decided to do something about it. There's a remix. I don't know if I can get it fast enough while I'm doing the show. The Edu Imbernon and Clement Imbermind vision of Wagging Tongue is one that I quite enjoy. But I'm with you in terms of, I like My Favorite Stranger and Wagging Tongue, but they're not songs that really, really grabbed me. Jason writes, whilst on leave, although I should have been working on my own songs, I've been learning a piece of software I've had on my PC for a while that I've not really had the chance to sit down and play with until the last few weeks. The software, Isotope RX, can separate songs into a few key components: vocals, drums, bass, and other instruments. Although it's not perfect, as there are usually remnants from other tracks, so I decided to spend a week learning the software and breaking down all the Memento Mori tracks to try to learn how to play the songs. As a result, I decided to test myself and do a different version of My Favorite Stranger. The unmixed, unprocessed version is attached. That I could listen to, as I find the original is too linear with no variation through the song. I'm also doing a classic 80s extended remix of Ghosts Again, about 70% there, as well as a stripped-down version of Caroline's Monkey. Almost done, just needs some finessing. Happy for you to listen to it if you want. And what is turning out to be an unintentional Dutch hardcore techno version of Never Let Me Go. I also have plans to do versions of People Are Good and Speak to Me. The others I'm still trying to work out. I appreciate you can't play the remix on your show for risk of a copyright strike, but as a devotee, I would value your thoughts on the attached mix. Most of my mates aren't massive music fans. Apart from one of them, I don't think any of the rest have ever been to a gig, except my best mate, who has a passing interest in Depeche Mode. He'll come to gigs with me. Not this tour, though. This will be the first he's missed since 1990, as he's fed up of seeing the same greatest hits tour the last few tours. So no one in my circle to get a fan's viewpoint. So, that's interesting, too, because even if they were doing a greatest hits tour, I guess if you were a passing fan, but the experience of just being there alone is enough. But I'm biased. Well, only the vocals have been used, including the FX vocals, as that's how the software broke the tracks down. Everything else is me, although I might tweak the drums a bit more. Anyway, I hope you enjoy, and please be kind with your critique if you get a chance, Jason. Jason, I really, really enjoyed it. And, as you said, I wish that I could share it on the show, but to risk a copyright strike, I can't. But I really did enjoy it, and I've listened to it a few times, actually. So thank you so much for sharing that with me, and I'm interested to hear your other reworkings as well. All right, Andrea writes, the My Favorite Stranger video reminds me of when I was young, working late nights, and had to walk home, especially on Saturday nights when the streets were full of drunk guys. I used to wear jeans, trainers, an oversized hoodie, and a denim jacket. I was hiding my long hair under the hoodie. I want to look like a boy because I want to get home safe. That's really cool, and I'm glad that you shared it, because while the video didn't do anything for me, that is the power of art, and it's really cool to see somebody who could go and relate to it. I watched it again, and it still didn't do anything for me. Like I said, my creative mind, I would have liked to have come up with something a little bit more engaging with the song, but I'm also not Anton Corbijn and not in charge of that, and it's all subjective, right? All right, let's go to Paul. Paul writes, love the show. I no longer need to search the internet for the latest Depeche Mode info as I just wait for your next installment. Yeah, even when there isn't anything going on, so you can hear about quotes from guitarists from Europe. I feel lucky to have known Martin for a few years back in the wild 90s, as being a Basildon boy. My good friend Graham of Spirit Feel remixed Walking in My Shoes. The 90s were great with Depeche. Keep up the great work. If you get any spare time, check out 10th Circle's Positive Addictions. Just a little album I wrote. P.S. Sent Vince the lure of Velvet, and he loved it. Made my day, Paul. When I saw the email, I get excited when I hear from people who have direct connections with the band. And I saw Spirit Feel, and I immediately knew what you were referring to, Paul, with Walking in My Shoes. I mean, you know, we're Depeche Mode fans after all. We consume every single aspect of it, and while I don't do as much memorizing of the names and the remixers of the current era of Depeche Mode, back then I certainly did. So to see Spirit Feel, I immediately knew what you were talking about. It reminds me of the friend of the show whose friend did the artwork for the singles release that had the digital, oh my God, the digital displays on the stands in various outdoor locations. I loved the entire, going along with the singles tour at that time in 89, 98. I'm sorry, 89, 90. I guess I'm getting there. No, you know what I'm talking about. I'm getting my years screwed up here. Sorry, it's been a long day and I haven't had a nap. And I've been up since 2:30. So I really loved that singles era and those releases, the photos and the press and the promotion around all of that. I thought it was really cool. And there was a friend of the show who knew the individual that shot all of that. So thank you so much, Paul. I'm definitely checking out 10th Circles. And I appreciate you sharing that with me. Lastly, we go to 88 Strange 88, who writes, LOL, Scum was the only song I liked off of Spirit. You're not the only one. I had another friend of mine, Jeff, who reached out and said that he also really liked Scum, which makes me feel like I need to go and revisit that track again. So, all right. I have a fan spotlight. I'm going to hang on to it. Kev F. wrote his own album ranking with a lot of really great detailed notes attached to it. And I want to be able to spend some time on it. I'm looking at the clock, and I went even longer than I had expected this week. So I'm going to hang on to Kev F's fan spotlight and share it with you next week. And hopefully on next week's show, I'll also have some thoughts to share if we get remixes for My Favorite Stranger, which should be an interesting batch of remixes. I'm curious to see how that song gets handled and what people do with it. As always, if you want to share anything, you can email me, thejonjustice@gmail.com. If you're listening up on YouTube, leave a comment there. Thank you so much for checking out another episode this week. I really do appreciate it. And as always, if you want to support my nerd world and you enjoy science fiction and like to read, I hope you'll go and check out my science fiction space opera series, EMBARK. Available on Amazon.com under Jon, Jon Justice, and also at mynerdworld.net. You can follow a ragtag squadron of pilots and one reluctant hero on a journey of survival as they fight for their future among the stars. If you like your science fiction to be epic with some romance, references to Depeche Mode, a lot of action, cool tech, EMBARK is perfect for you. It is written for adults, but if you're looking for some great reading for the younger friends or relatives in your life, ages 11 plus is what the book is rated as, even though it's written for adults. Available in ebook, hardcover, paperback, and audiobook, again, on Amazon.com or mynerdworld.net. Check out this fast-paced and action-packed science fiction adventure. All right. Again, thank you so much for checking out this week's episode. I hope wherever you are happy, you're healthy, and you're safe. I'll talk to you again next week. Bye.
Hello, this is Martin Gore from Depeche Mode. Hi, this is